South China Morning Post, 26 September 2022, U.S.-China relations, economic globalization has forever changed, warns ex-finance minister Lou Jiwei. People forget that globalization and free trade were a bribe from the United States to help fight the Cold War against the USSR. The world's best days for economic globalization are behind it forever, and the U.S. ideologicalized industrial subsidies are bound to fail, warns an outspoken former Chinese finance minister as Washington steps up its countering of Beijing in technology and supply chains. And various factors undercutting the foundation for globalization, including such ideological moves by Western countries, are unlikely to end soon, according to Lou Jiwei, who is now director of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the country's top political advisory body. The economic globalization that brought the broadest benefits to the people of the world will not come back, he said on Saturday at the Fall Summit of the Global Asset Management Forum, held by the China Wealth Management 50 Forum think tank. But Lou contends that ideologicalized industrial subsidies have never happened in China. The U.S. blaming China for giving industrial subsidies to its domestic firms and distorting the global market was a focus of the U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue, a mechanism that ground to a halt under the presidential administration of Donald Trump. China has been funding projects in several countries to advance its interests worldwide. China is not funding these projects to serve the locals but rather to provide its citizens access to natural resources and to develop a market for its low-priced export goods. Lou's latest comments, similar to those he made in February, keep the focus on Washington as it has been stepping up efforts to boost American competitiveness with China in high-tech sectors, and reshoring manufacturing, with a series of legislative moves this year. These include the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act, signed into law last month. The Biden administration has also been rallying allies to isolate the world's second-largest economy from high-tech supply chains via the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework and the Chip 4 Alliance. Lou said history has shown that trade protectionism cannot solve any problems and is a problem in itself. This cares about China as without globalization, China will fall. And in a changing world unseen in a century, Lou said that the choice between opening up and closing is a fundamental question related to the rise and fall of all the nations, including China. The European Chamber of Commerce warned last week that ideology is trumping the economy in China, urging Beijing to be more pragmatic in its decision-making, avoid erratic policy shifts, and focus on rebuilding investor confidence via comprehensive reforms and opening up. The impacts of the coronavirus pandemic and war have exposed vulnerabilities of international industrial and supply chains in a globalized world economy. Lou also warned that globalization would lead to an outflow of industrial operations that a nation does not have a significant advantage in, resulting in lost jobs and a widening wealth gap. This is very dangerous for China as China imports over 90% of its food and raw materials and exports 85% of what it produces. Instead of boosting structural reforms at home to tackle the problem, some countries' decision-makers choose to look outward and blame globalization, which has been a cause of trade friction,